For more, I'm now joined by former NASA astronaut and ISS commander, Dr. Leroy Chow. Doctor, as always, thanks for hopping on. For those of us, most of us who aren't astronauts, you see the headline. It doesn't sound good. Leak on the ISS causes fear of catastrophic failure. In your eyes, how worrisome is this?
Well, there are three things that you really worry about when you're in space. One is fire, one is contamination of the atmosphere, and the third is a leak, right? So this is one of the big three. And in fact, we routinely drill during our training to do submarine-like drills to isolate close hatches, isolate modules to help figure out where a leak is, right? And so, as you mentioned, this leak has been going on for quite a while, 6 years. It's been really relatively small. And of course, the Russian cosmonauts have attempted a few repairs using epoxy and other materials and have really slowed it down. But now, it looks like there's still something going on. And of course, they keep the hatch closed to that small vestibule when they're not using it. And so they've been able to operate so far, without any issue really. But now the fact that the station pressure is still dropping suggests there may be a new leak, a new problem somewhere.
They say that the crew on board right now is fine. They're conducting operations, business as usual. Would you want to be on board the ISS right now with this information?
Well, astronauts, we deal with risk, of course. You'd have to in order to get on top of a bunch of propellant and a lot of moving parts and fire. And so, yes, I would be okay being on board. It's a balance. You're assessing what you know technically, figuring out what you don't know, and then making an informed decision. But the fact that they have delayed the next launch, of course, they're being cautious and conservative. But it tells you that they're more concerned about this than just kind of what's been going on over the last 6 years.
Right. And what's the worst case scenario here? Because now experts are warning of this high cycle fatigue, which might be what we saw with like the Titan submersible implosion. What exactly is that? What does that mean?
Sure. Well, you have a pressure vessel, either pressure on the inside, higher pressure on the inside, or higher pressure on the outside in the case of a submarine. And you cycle it, right? You change the pressure. Like in an airplane, you go up and you pressurize the cabin, you come back down, and that's what happens with the Hawaiian Airlines accident from many years ago, where the top of the aircraft basically, came apart catastrophically. And so it's a possibility here. You have to keep in mind that these modules, now the core module is the same design that was used on Mir. It was the same design that was used on the old Salyut space stations in the 70s, and they were originally designed for a 6-year life. Okay, but having said that, Mir operated for 15 years, and although they started having problems closer to the 12-year point, none of the problems were because of this kind of a leakage and possible metal fatigue. But it is a concern and a possibility, although I would say it's probably, just as a guess, it's probably a fairly small concern.
And before I let you go, we know that the ISS is set to be decommissioned in 2030, so just another 5 years or so in orbit and in service. What does switching that out look like? Does the current one come back down to Earth? Is another one being built? What's the latest with that?
Sure. The plan right now that NASA has been pursuing for a number of years is to get commercial companies, much like SpaceX developed the Dragon and Boeing is working on the Starliner, to take over these big government projects. And so there are a few commercial companies that have received some NASA funding to start building smaller space stations, commercial space stations. And just like NASA can now buy services from SpaceX, they would buy the same services from commercial space station suppliers and be able to send astronauts there. So the hope is that we can get one or more of these stations flying and operating before 2030. Space station, it's huge, right? And so it's going to be brought down in a controlled manner by attaching rocket engines or using its own rocket engines to slow it down and come down in part of the Indian Ocean, which we call the spacecraft graveyard, well away from shipping lanes and other activities.
And coming down in different parts, different sections, or all
of... that's one way to do it, but that has its own risks. And so I'm guessing that probably the most likely scenarios, they'll bring it all down in one piece, just like Mir did. They brought Mir down in one piece. and it was able to crash into the ocean successfully and safely away from any human activity.
I'm already imagining the visuals of that day and the media coverage and spectacle. You and I will be on for wall-to-wall coverage that day, I'm sure. Dr. Leroy Chiao, thank you so much as always. Have a great weekend, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You too.